Hi, and welcome back to Can My Animals Eat That? I'm Emily Moat, TSU 4-H agent in Warren County, and today we're going to look at some household and landscaping plants that are considered poisonous to companion animals. Now, there are lots of different animals that fall under that title of companion animal, but for today's purposes, we're only going to focus on our canine and feline friends. This is not a comprehensive list of all of those household and landscaping plants that pose a threat to our canine and feline friends. I just picked a few plants that are common in my area. So our objectives for today, we're going to learn the parts of each plant that are poisonous, learn or become aware of the toxic principle of each plant, learn those symptoms of poisoning from each plant, and then discuss some tips to help prevent or discourage our canine and feline friends from ingesting toxic plants. I'm not going to discuss the specifics of how to treat poisoning from these plants. If you do suspect your dog or cat has ingested any of these plants and are showing signs of toxicity, please contact your veterinarian immediately. Now, toxicity from these plants may vary depending on your dog or cat's age, size, condition, quantity of the plant consumed, and part of the plant consumed. But let's jump right in. The first plant we're going to look at is the begonia. Now, the begonia family contains more than 1,000 species and hybrids, so we're not going to go through and talk about how to identify each of those 1,000 species and hybrids. We are going to discuss begonias as a whole. Begonias are considered mildly toxic, and their toxicity is non-fatal. The most toxic portion of a begonia plant is the tuberous root. Now, not all begonias have tuberous root systems. Some have rhizomes or a fibrous root system. So it's really that begonias with the tuberous root system that pose the biggest threat. The toxic principle of the begonia is soluble calcium oxalates. Clinical signs of toxicity from begonia include an intense burning or painful sensation of the mouth, throat, lips, and tongue, excessive drooling, choking, swelling of the throat, inability or difficulty swallowing, and vomiting. Clinical signs will appear immediately or within 2 hours after ingestion and may continue to appear for up to 2 weeks after ingestion. Next, we're going to take a look at irises. Now, just like with begonia, the genus Iris is home to a lot of different varieties and hybrids of irises. So we are going to talk about irises as a whole and not go through and look at each one of those specific iris species. The toxic principles in iris plants are resinoids, purgative, irisin, and cytotoxic terpenoids. The highest concentration of these two toxins are found in the bulbs of the plant, but the leaves and roots are also considered toxic. Poisoning may occur from either chewing or ingesting the toxic parts of the plant. So your dog or cat doesn't actually have to swallow parts of the toxic parts of the plant, the bulb, the root, or the leaves. They can simply chew on them and signs of toxicity, or they might get a mild case of toxicity will appear. Clinical signs include salivation or drooling, vomiting and GI ulcerations, lethargy, diarrhea, burn-like sores on the lips and mouth, and skin irritation might also appear. The amount of plant consumed and the part of the plant consumed will determine how quickly these symptoms appear. Symptoms may develop almost immediately or over a period of several hours. Again, it just depends on how much and the parts that they chew or ingest. The next plant we're going to look at is one of my favorites, and that's lantana. It's a really showy, pretty plant that we see a lot in hanging baskets. Some people incorporate it into their landscaping and even have it as plants in the house to help brighten up their home environment. Lantana is toxic to both dogs and cats, but we tend to see dogs affected by it more often than we do cats. Now, lantana does have a pungent smell and taste, and animals unfamiliar with the plant may ingest enough to affect them. But animals that are familiar with the plant are more than likely to steer clear of it. The toxic principle of lantana is pentacyclyl terpenoids. The leaves and berries are the toxic portion of the plant. And it doesn't matter what stage of ripeness that the berries are in, through all stages, they are poisonous. So it doesn't matter if they're green or if they're in that final ripe stage and that where they're that dark blue, purpley color, they're going to be poisonous. Clinical symptoms of toxicity are vomiting, diarrhea, labored breathing, and weakness. Now, lantana isn't just poisonous to our dogs and cats, but it is also poisonous to livestock. And one of those clinical signs that we tend to mainly see in poisoning of lantana in livestock is liver failure. We don't really see that in our companion animals. That symptom is mainly associated with their livestock. Symptoms appear within 1 to 2 days after ingestion. The toxic dose of lantana is 1% or more of the animal's body weight. So it can take a very small amount of lantana for toxicity to occur. Dogs typically don't ingest a fatal dose, but unless treated immediately, they can deteriorate and die within 1 to 3 weeks. A fatal dose causes death within 2 to 4 days. So lantana is one of those houseplants that can be fatal to our canine friends. So if you do have lantana, just make sure your dogs can't get to it and they do start shedding or dropping those berries, leaves, anything like that. You keep them swept up to where they can't pick them up. Next is the peace lily. The toxic principle of this plant is calcium oxalate crystals, and all parts of the peace lily are toxic. Clinical signs include tissue irritation, so intense pain or burning sensation to the mouth, tongue, and esophagus, resulting in increased drooling, vomiting, difficulty swallowing, and increased vocalization. Onset of clinical signs may appear immediately or occur up to 2 hours after chewing or ingesting parts of the plant. So your dog or cat doesn't have to actually consume parts of the peace lily, they can chew on it and toxicity will occur. The onset of that intense pain in the mouth often deters our animals from continuing to chew or eat the plant, limiting exposure. So peace lilies, even though they are toxic, it is a mild toxicity that we see. Most animals will recover within 24 hours of chewing or ingesting the plant. Now, we're going to take a look at rhododendrons. The rhododendron is a genus of over 600 species that does include the azalea. So just like with the begonias and just like with the iris, we're not going to go through and look at each species of rhododendron, We're actually going to look at rhododendron as a whole. The toxic principle of rhododendron plants is grayanotoxin. All parts of a rhododendron plant are toxic, including the trimmings, with the leaves being the most toxic portion. Ingestion of just a few leaves can lead to toxicity. Clinical signs of poisoning include vomiting, anorexia, diarrhea. You may also see weakness, ataxia, which is the loss of control of bodily movements, a weakened pulse, and depression. Symptoms may start appearing within 4 to 12 hours after ingestion and can persist for several days. If symptoms are left untreated, they may progress into your animal's cardiovascular and central nervous systems shut down. So toxicity from the rhododendron can be fatal if left untreated. Now, we're going to take a look at the tiger lily. The tiger lily poses a bigger threat to cats than it does dogs. Now, the tiger lily is not the only lily plant that is poisonous. It's just the sole one we're going to focus on today. Lily plants that fall in the genus Lilium and Hemerocallis are poisonous. And the reason why they're poisonous is because they are what we consider to be nephrotoxic or damaging to the kidneys. Now, the toxic agent of the tiger lily and those other varieties of lilies that fall in the genus Lilium and Hemerocallis is currently unknown. So we don't know what about these plants is poisonous to our cats. The whole plant is considered toxic, including the stamen, petals, and pollen. The first clinical signs of toxicity for cats are salivation, vomiting, anorexia, and depression. These signs appear between 1 and 3 hours after ingestion and can last for 2 to 6 hours. The symptoms will start to go away, and they may lead you to believe that your cat is getting over a mild GI episode and in turn delay effective treatment. If left untreated in cats, ingestion of the tiger lily and those other lily species that fall in the genus Lilium and Hemerocallis will lead to kidney failure. Now, with clinical signs in dogs, we see vomiting and other GI signs, but it is not fatal like tiger lily is to our cats. So if you do have lilies in your household, we definitely want to make sure that we keep them away from our feline friends. Next, we're going to take a look at tulips. Now, just like with the rhododendron, the begonia, and the iris, the tulip genus includes a variety of species, and we're going to look at tulips as a whole. Now, the toxic principles in tulips are tulipoisoids A and B. Clinical signs of toxicity from tulips include vomiting, hypersalivation, anorexia, and depression. In severe cases, we may see arrhythmia or irregular or abnormal heartbeat and dyspnea or difficulty or labored breathing. All parts of the plant are considered toxic, with the bulb having the highest concentration of the toxic principle. So even though the entire part of the tulip plant, is poisonous, that bulb is extremely, extremely poisonous. Now that we've looked at some of those household and landscaping plants that can be poisonous, let's take a moment to talk about ways we can prevent our pets from ingesting them. And that first way is be aware of toxic risks. Remember, many things that are not desirable to people are readily ingested by our dogs and cats. Learn to identify problematic plants and symptoms of their toxicity. If you enjoy houseplants or are looking to expand your landscaping, check to see if the plants you're considering are toxic and how toxic they could potentially be to your pets. If those plants you are wanting to bring into the house or add to your landscaping are toxic, look and see if there are varieties that are much safer or a different plant that is just as appealing to you that is not considered toxic to your dog or cat. Next, we want to reduce the access to plants. Consider the ability of the animal to jump and dig when making sure toxic substances aren't accessible. For example, placing a houseplant on top of a bookshelf may not be enough if there are cats that like to jump up onto high shelves. Covering fertilized areas with mulch may not be enough because dogs can dig and find roots or bulbs buried beneath. Always err on the side of caution when determining which plants to bring into the house or plant in the yard. If your dog has access to flower beds in their fenced-in area, be sure to supervise them while outside. Some breeds and some dogs like to dig more than others. And lastly, increase stimulation available in your pet's environment. Making sure your pets have access to toys or games that engage them will help prevent them from becoming curious and getting into things around the house. Also, making sure you spend that quality time with your pet playing and make sure that they receive plenty of exercise can help reduce boredom and in turn make them less likely to get into things around the house. Again, thank you for checking out our last installment of Can My Animals Eat That? If you have any 4-H related questions and live in Warren County, you can give me a call at area code 931-473-8484 or send me an email at emote@utk.edu. Thanks.